Coming to you from the all-new Live House in Hollywood, California.
Hey everybody, it's time for Pensado's Place. You're going to meet the brilliant and bad, and I mean brilliant and bad, Ebonie Smith in just a minute. But first, folks are stepping up all over the planet for the Awe Sounds Global Giveaway. 4 winners each week who win either the Awestream True Wireless Earphones or the Aweflex ANC Neckband Earphones. Here's the first week winners. They are Amy Hales from Port Angeles, Washington, Cleon Richardson from Trinidad and Tobago, Joanna Daneva from Haskovo, Bulgaria, and Astro Safari from Vancouver, Canada. Congratulations, you guys. Now, how do you enter? It's as simple as this. Go to pensadosplace.tv/awesounds, fill out the info, and boom, you're in. It's open for everybody 18 years old and up, and good all over the globe. Did I say aw hell yeah? Aw sounds and aw hell yeah. The weekly winners are announced here on the show, on our socials, and on Aw Sounds social media. You got 3 more weeks, so hit it. Also, our friends at SoundCloud are launching a powerful new partnership and initiative to their platform this week. We're going to have them on very shortly to talk about it. Look for it. It's going to be very helpful for you. And as always, if you would, please like, subscribe, and click notify. Sign up for our newsletter and hit us on our socials. And now I am pleased to introduce, she's such a talented producer, artist, and engineer, from the cast album of Hamilton to running Atlantic Record Studios, from Sturgill Simpson to Cardi B to Gender Amplified. Meet the future. Enjoy our conversation with Ebonie Smith.
Hi, hello.
Hey, what's up?
It's very good to be here, and thank you so much for that introduction. And I think of this moment as a bit of a milestone, to be honest, because you can't get much better than Pensado Place when it comes to music education for this era and time, for the digital consumer, for the digital artist. And so I'm just so grateful to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
And we would like to close the show with that, and we'll talk to everybody later. So there's a lot to dig in, which is great.
Yeah.
One of the things that we did from the very beginning of Pensado's Place is we embraced having women be part of the discussion. Mm-hmm. The intuition, the skill set, the approach, the things that women bring to the table are not only critical, but the track record of success is long. Mm-hmm. In your particular case, one of the things that's just so amazing to me is your drive between education and technology. Mm-hmm. is at the root of what you did, and it goes, I mean, the sequencer changed your life, huh?
Right. Absolutely. Obviously, the first entry point with the sequencer is looking at the fact that you can be creative. It's another medium in the toolbox for a musician. Mm-hmm. So that was the first entry point. But then I found myself becoming very interested in the inner workings of the technology, how it is that we had even arrived to computer-based composition, what that meant. And so a lot of it was working backwards, right? Once I realized that it was possible to use hardware equipment, software equipment to create music, it became very quickly an enterprise of trying to figure out, well, how do these things work? Is it just magic or is it science? Mm-hmm. Is it just magic or is it math? Mm-hmm. Right? So the educational aspect of it, and I'm glad you brought that up, because really every engineer and every producer is in the process of learning, and you never get to the end stage. A, because there's so much to learn about the past. Yep. And B, because the future is always happening in real time. Mm-hmm. So the present is never really still when it comes to audio. You're always building on top of the discoveries of the great engineers of the past and adding to that in such a way that you can never learn enough. There's always new knowledge. There's old knowledge. So it's just really, in my opinion, a privilege to be a part of this pursuit. Mm-hmm. It's really a grand pursuit to understand how it is to create using technological means, how to use computers, how to use hardware, how to use electronics and all types of technologies, mechanical technologies as well, acoustic and mechanical technologies, as a means of being creative and being expressive in ways that help to document the human conversation and the human experience. So.
That's probably my favorite paragraph I've ever heard on this show. I mean, that was brilliant. You know, we get a little emotional about what we do and the passion that we have for it. And man, I'm about to tear up. But having said that, I'm gonna change the course a tiny bit. I've never known someone that read as many books as you do. I mean, you're reading bios by Clive Davis, bios by Al Schmidt. You're always reading manuals. You're always reading books on everything. I admire that because I still read a few books myself. And can you explain to me, and I'm being a devil's advocate, can you explain to me what you get from books that you don't get from videos?
Interesting. That's a really great question. I think, first of all, let me just start by saying they're both very valuable, and you need both, in my opinion. Because there's something that you don't get from books that you certainly can get from videos. But as far as what I get from books, it's intention, right? Number one, which has to do with the fact that if somebody has taken time to write 300 pages or 400 pages of information, there's an intention there. And there's an organization about how those ideas have been laid out. There has been an extreme editing process. The person who wrote the book has spent the time to really put the ideas in sequence in a way that really help you as a reader understand a much larger set of concepts, right? So there's an intention there. And usually people write a book when they have a whole lot to share. I can get on Instagram and very quickly do a video. You might get a nugget here, a nugget there. It's still very important, but you're going to miss a whole lot of information because I really haven't taken the time to synthesize those ideas. So there's an intention typically with a book that you don't get with a video. And so this drives into the next point. The next point is that books are typically very, very detailed. They take a lot of patience to put together and a lot of patience to read. And it's in all of that detail that people have the space, the pages to really go into all the complex concepts that you're not going to get in a video. We understand how the internet works. The internet, people have very short attention spans online, and they have only so much time to be advertised to and to be talked to. So usually the person who's created the video hasn't spent a whole lot of time going into the nuts and the bolts. Versus if I'm reading a book, there may be a whole chapter on the most mundane concept, or just the most complicated and arduous topic. A whole chapter will be dedicated to that. And the third thing I will say is something that I realized was very powerful. Someone said to me when I was younger was if you don't want a Black person to know something, put it in a book.
Oh my God.
And I always took offense to that.
As well you should.
But my means of taking offense to it was to challenge myself to always read. And one thing that I realized once I started reading was that, wow, there's a lot of information in books. There is an extreme amount of information in books. And just to top off this, I will say this one thing. I got the job at Atlantic Records because I found my way from a book. All the contact information that I needed to make sure my resume got seen and to make sure that I got an interview was in a book that I had been gifted by an artist that I had recorded a record with. So she gifted me this book, and literally it had all the email addresses, all the numbers, phone numbers, all the names of the top executives at Atlantic Records. And I just called them and emailed them and ad nauseum. And here I am. So books, Dave, are I could keep going about books, but that's, I think, a basic understanding of how I think about that. And I will always be a reader.
Let me interject two quick things. One is we're going to send you a book
Oh.
We have a book that was written by a female engineer who also oversees the P&E wing. So there's a book.
Maureen Droney?
Yeah, Maureen. She wrote our book. So there's a book so I'll send that to you.
Okay, well, I love Maureen. Shout out Maureen.
Oh, absolutely. I talked to her last night at length. And also, one of the points you make, and I want to talk about your Atlantic job, is, and we talk about this on the show all the time, that oftentimes the internet doesn't give you context.
Yes.
It's just information, and then you're processing the information without referencing, without being able to pull. And the other part is everybody who has been our guest, everybody who is great, also stays curious.
Yes.
You never get to the end of your learning. And if you don't feel that hunger, you're short-circuiting your journey. Uh-huh. You have to keep asking. You can't ever get there. So amongst the many hats, Ebonie, that you wear, your day gig, and I don't know where you find time because you've got about 9 day gigs that you do. But your job at Atlantic Records, you're an in-house producer and engineer, and you've been there, I think, since 2013. Describe your job, what you do there, and what experiences you gain from that. Because one of the things is you have the breadth of working with lots of different artists, but you explain to us.
So I like to think of my job as encompassing 3 areas. So there's the technical, right? So I, as an engineer, work as a liaison between the artists and the producers and all the technology. So my job is to know the room as best as possible. In the Atlantic studio, we have 2 primary rooms and we're looking to expand, but my jurisdiction is mostly our A room and our B room. Mm. So my job is to know every inch of those rooms. I know all the quirks. When the computer's being weird for absolutely no apparent reason, I typically know how to fix those type of quirks. I know all the technology. When it comes in, I make sure I read the manuals. Sometimes I write my own user guides for some of our additional engineers that come in. So it's also my job to make sure I'm on the fore and the front of the different technologies that are coming into the studio. So I've spent quite a bit of time learning about Dante and learning about different technologies that are on the horizon. So I'm up to speed as we begin to integrate them into our studio, but also within the larger context of the industry. Mm-hmm. So there's being the technical liaison, the technical port of call, if you will. Then the second area I like to think of is a creative. So as a musician, I've in the last several years gotten an opportunity to start producing my own artists and actually signing some artists to demo deals and developing some original works right out of the Atlantic studio. So as a musician, I get to flex that muscle, and obviously working on all the different types of music that I have over the years, it gives me a lot to draw from. I've got a chance to work on country, pop, musical theater, hip hop and R&B, electronic music. So I've seen the inner workings of so many different types of styles. And so I'm fortunate that I work for a company that's giving me the space and the opportunity to begin to develop my own style as a producer and crafting records on my own.
I'd like to say you probably earned it as opposed to gave it to you.
Actually it's a program that I initiated. So it's something that I pitched to the head of A&R, and he was like, yeah, I trust you. Just keep me in the loop, sign what you want. And we believe in you and we want to see you grow. So that means the world to me. And also, lastly, the third area of my job incorporates administrative, so in operational work. So I'm usually the person in our studio A. If there are tours that come through, I'm usually giving those tours. If people have questions about the day-to-day or the operational aspect, making sure the studios are up to par and looking as they should, and co-assisting my immediate supervisor with a bit of management too. So managing interns and helping with our junior staff because I've been there the longest. So I've seen the different changes in the company. And as far as my day-to-day, there's really no typical day-to-day. Sometimes we have a whole musical theater company coming in to do some recordings. Sometimes we have mix day. I'm just mixing all day. Some days we have acoustic content sessions coming in. Some days I'm producing one of my artists. So it just depends on what the schedule is of the week. And it's in terms of hours, it's just when I get there, you know.
Yeah. What gear is in Studio A?
So we actually have an incredible API 1608 small format 32 channel, HDIOs, a couple of RedNet interfaces as well that we're getting familiarized with. Obviously, we have some really great outboard CL1B. We have 1176s, whole sidecar, vintage Neves, 1073s. Have a couple. Obviously, our 1608 is outfitted with a number of 500 series modules that I rely on heavily to give an incredible analog sound, especially when it comes to tracking. I really think our 1608 shines the most when we're tracking and when I'm doing band work, can really dig into it. We also, in our A room, have, what else do we have in there? A pair of distressors, 33609. So we have some pretty great outboard gear. We have a pretty good mic closet as well. Some vintage mics, a few mics that are rumored to have been used on Aretha and Ray Charles. So just keep the legacy at Atlantic alive.
Yeah.
So it's great. I think we have an incredible room. I'm not even doing it justice by telling you the things that we have in our A room, because we have so much backline, so much outboard that's scattered about different studio spaces that we manage. So Atlantic has quite a robust studio operations team span across several cities. So I'm glad to be the person who gets to hold it down in New York City. Fantastic.
I read some tips that you gave on how to keep the creative flow in the studio going. I'll start you off. You get to the studio 2 hours before anybody else. And what are some other techniques that you use in order to keep that creativity from being overpowered by the technology?
Right. So I like to call it working out. So every day I try to put at least 30 minutes into production work. And I've been using, honestly, lately, especially in quarantine, because we can't get in the studio with artists that much. One of the things I've been doing is getting on Instagram Live and making tracks on live. So just working through instrumentals and also playing a lot of music live. And I do it daily, about 30 minutes a day, 30 minutes to an hour. And a lot of really cool people come into my live. And so I'll put together these instrumental beat tapes, and I'll give them out to people that come to my live. And they will send me back all types of really cool vocals that they put on my tracks. It's just so great. And I get such great ideas from them. So when I ended up doing a Afrobeat instrumental tape, and the only reason I did that was because there was someone in my live who was like, do you do Afrobeats? And I was like, no, I don't know very much of anything about Afrobeats, but I'll try it. So I started studying Afrobeats, started studying quite a bit of Burna Boy and some of the top Afrobeat producers, and started trying to understand. And so then I put together this tape, and now all these artists are recording to these tracks that I made. And that is the type of thing that keeps me these days when I can't go to the studio 2 hours early and I can't stay 2 hours late. It's the thing that I've been doing to refresh my palette. I get so many great ideas from the internet, from Instagram and from YouTube. And it's great. It's such an offering. I think typically creatives can be so insular, but I have been of that school of thought, but now I don't have the option. I don't have the liberty of thinking that way. So I've been just reaching out and just offering myself and all of my information, things I know, offering my tracks, just putting them out there for free for anybody that wants to use them. And it's been that type of giving has been reciprocated. And I have gained so much creatively from it.
Your ability to combine philosophy and practicality is one of the things that I think our audience can really take from. So, when you think about production, you think about it as theatrics, that the word record actually means documentation.
Right.
It's not an old word. It's how you capture things. So when you come to the studio, I'm assuming that when you also do analysis of number one records and process and put together your own kind of manifesto so that you are informing yourself. And then you tell me if I have this right or not. I think that as you inform yourself, it then leaves room for your creativity to bounce inside those lanes, and you can free yourself up to do that with that information. Now, am I getting that right?
I think you're absolutely on point. It's all one thing. That's how I like to think about it. It's all one thing. You call it philosophy. I call it common sense.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's all one thing. And I really think that when it comes to my music and why I do what I do, my desire to participate in the music business has a lot to do with what the industry offers as a service to humanity.
Mm-hmm.
Right, so having a number one hit, in my opinion, is more about the fact that you've popularized a record so much so that it has the greatest opportunity to be preserved over time.
Mm-hmm.
You've just made a lot of copies of it. Back in the day, if you had a number one hit, that meant that so many copies were pressed and so many copies were then sold. And so it was in such demand that you had to copy it multiple times and sell it many, many times. And so now in this day and age, those records that were popular back then remain popular now because they were just copied so many times that they have the greatest opportunity of being preserved.
Mm-hmm.
I never forget the time I was actually on an NY bus. I was on a city bus, and there was a Roberta Flack record that someone on the bus had just purchased. And he said, I don't want the record. You can have the record. I already have the record at home. I just wanted the cover.
Mm-hmm.
I'd lost the sleeve.
Mm-hmm.
So you can have the record. So in that moment, what happened then was that there's so many copies of that record that he could give one away. And I could go listen to it.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a record from the 70s, right? This is an old record, but it's preserved in time because of its popularity.
Mm-hmm.
So today, we're not talking about records or physical copies, but the concept is still the same in that the streams, 1 billion streams, just means that it's been streamed 1 billion times versus something that's been streamed 1,000 times. Right? So there's more copies of it out there, more opportunities for that timestamp to be experienced. And that timestamp is a slither of whatever that artist was experiencing at the time. If it's Ed Sheeran, Photograph, it's a beautiful love song about a moment in time pertaining to his love life. But that experience is universal, right? So you're preserving a human experience through a track. So the fact that it's been streamed billions of times just means that billions of people have had the opportunity to relate to a common experience by way of the musicality of Ed Sheeran. So it really is powerful. And I wanted to say this one thing. I know you want to jump in. I just want to say this one thing is that we're very lucky in this time. We're very lucky in this time because this is the time in human history where we have had recording technology. So if I wanted to go listen to the Psalms of David, how he produced them and composed them, I just have to guess. But we're very lucky in that we don't have to guess what the intention was behind the music that is being made now. We can just press a button and it can play.
And now let's do the converse side of that. The converse side of that, and again for our audience, it's critical to understand that this approach and the cerebral notion of it is really about freeing up your creativity.
Right.
And part of that process, when you master it, makes you better creatively.
Yeah.
But the other thing that Ebonie will often make sure people understand is that you have to have your spiritual sense right.
Yes.
And you can't define yourself by just success. That's not the definition of who you are and not the definition of what you bring to the table. And you shouldn't define yourself as winning or losing based on this notion of success. We've preached that from the beginning of Pensado's place,
right?
Because that is too limiting a definer. Mm-hmm. Like you're much more than your parts. You're the sum of your parts. And is that a philosophy that you preach and espouse?
I do, because the reward of being able to produce records is the art form. Mm-hmm. Just being able to do it is liberating. And I try to tell people all the time with respect to the work that I do for Gender Amplified, which is an organization that I started to...
Are we going to get into it?
I figured you would, but to encourage and inspire young girls in particular, and to drive them toward the craft of music production. And it's not so that they can be hit makers. It's so that they can collide with the opportunity to experience the craft, because the craft in and of itself is transformative. Now, having said that, I will say this. I'm also someone who has made every effort to make a living at what I do, and a person who has every intention of making hit records and has been a part of hit records. But my motivation for wanting to make hit records is so that certain ideas can be preserved in culture and fixed in time. Mm-hmm. And the power of that is something that I'm very particular about. I'm not just interested in having a hit record so that I can say I have a hit record and I have all these Grammys. It's a service. It's a service. It's a desire to do the best work and a focus on the best possible work. And when you make great work, obviously you want everybody to hear it. And that's really what creates the popularity of your music. And the hit aspect of it is that you've made a great product, you've made great music, and your desire to push it out into the world is in hopes that it can help other people and it can serve as a transformative agent for all listeners and all people who experience it.
In the Black church, we go, well. Preach.
Hallelujah.
Speaking of the Black church, I don't think there's too many places where music is being created strictly from the heart.
Uh-huh.
They have some of the most technically gifted musicians ever, and it spawned a lot of talent along the way. How do you balance? You've got a massive amount of education, and it has helped you well. How do you balance your technical side with your creative side? Because you can't use them both at the same time. They're kind of enemies of each other. And how do you get back to that emotional status from the church, and then all the books you've read and all the coursework you've done and all the degrees you have? Is it an impediment sometimes? How do you balance that?
That's a really great question. I don't know that I've ever been asked that, because it is a juggling act for sure. I wouldn't say that it's an impediment, but I would definitely say that one has to, when it comes to being creative, one has to distill everything that I gather from all these various areas of my life. And I have to put a limit on what it is that I'm trying to express and how much time I give myself to express it, because otherwise I'll become very heady. Mm-hmm. I think for me, the easiest thing to do is to just say, okay, I'm making something right now. And however it turns out after I'm done with this studio time is just what it is. Mm-hmm. Because as a technician, I will want to revise and remix and redo and I put a beat tape out, like I mentioned last month. I put a beat tape out and it almost didn't make it out because I was still fidgeting and trying to change some things, and I didn't incorporate this sample, and I need to go because because from a intellectual perspective, I think I need to go back and resample. It's like, no, just put the music out. It's not going to be the last time you're going to make something. Just offer it up, and however it turns out is however it turns out, and move on to the next thing. So time limits and deadlines, they help me tremendously. They keep me from getting in my head. Now, the second part of your question is, your first part was how does the technical not get in the way of the creative? The second part being, how do I stay grounded spiritually with respect to everything that I know and I've studied? And, I think ultimately my faith is in everything that I'm studying. If I'm studying transistors, I can see God in that. If I'm studying music, there's God all up and through that. I think God is in everything. And the rustle of trees, I just see God in everything. The ocean, I can go stand at the ocean and I can hear God. I can see God in everything. So it doesn't matter what I'm doing. I think I'm always able to gauge the spiritual connection and what I should be doing with respect to my spiritual life and output. The other thing is, I'd like to say, I have an artist that I care very deeply about as I guess you could say she's just a bit of someone I look up to in music a lot as a female producer. Mm-hmm. And her name is Twinkie Clark, mm-hmm. who's a gospel artist and one of the first remixers of, before there was Kirk Franklin, there was Twinkie Clark that was remixing, remixing soul music and, gospel music and creating very interesting pop compositions, mm-hmm. from Christian music or hymns or Bible verses. And one thing she said was that the anointing, her mother, who was her mentor, taught her that the anointing is the thing that you lead with as an artist, because it's really easy for church-going folks or Christians or from the Black church to get lost when it comes to the actual industry aspect of the music, because in church, the imperative, the whole mission statement is different. In church, you're creating music solely for the worshiping of God. Mm-hmm. And when you take that away and you start to go towards the industry, intention can get lost very quickly. Mm-hmm. But Twinkie's whole idea is that as a great musician, it's not on you. It's really God's anointing on your life. And another way of saying it is that God provides you with a muse. You're not the genius. God provides you with the muse. And when you look up the word music, you get to a Greek word that means muse. So conceptually, music has always been about being inspired by something higher than you. Mm-hmm. And so that's how I always think about it. So when I'm creating in the studio with artists, I'm not really thinking it's all on me to begin with. I have to be given the anointing. I have to be encouraged. The spirit has to be conjured. So as I'm moving through the industry, I always think of my creative output in that way. And I know a lot of creatives don't think that way. So I try to manage that type of energy by trying to identify and work with creatives that have that same point of view.
The thing that, as we have spent, a fair amount of time, and we'll spend a lot more time in the future talking not on the show and, kicking signs back and forth and so on and so forth. You are very humble about your accomplishments. And so I get to capsulize them. You don't have to. But from the Hamilton Cast album to Sturgill Simpson, which, those are Grammy certificates you've had. And then the incredible breadth of Charlie Puth, Janelle Monáe, Jimmy Fallon, Lin-Manuel Miranda, Cardi B, Kelly Clarkson, let alone everything inside the Atlantic stuff. Plus you're a singer, a graduate of NYU in music technology, master's program, Barnard for Africana Studies, spent time in Cameroon. Two things. One, please take a vacation And then two, when they make you the president of NAMM, will you still be our friend? Because that's probably about 2 weeks from now, given your accomplishment. But here's what I really wanted to ask: with all that you do, is there a Ebonie Smith signature in what you do creatively, whether mixing or engineering or whatever?
I think I'm still on that journey. I think I'm still getting there. The people that work with me and the artists that I produce for, I think they would say, yes, there is. But I don't know that I have found that. I'm still on that journey, and it's an exciting journey to be on. And the more I create, the more I chip away at that. I have, to Dave's previous point, I have so many influences. So I'm looking at this point in my career to begin to chip away at what my sound is as a producer, as an artist, and using all of these influences as a bit of a starting point. But I'm still on that journey, and I'm excited about where it's leading me.
Well, yeah, because when somebody has Incubus, Stevie Nicks, Rick Rubin, and Marley Marl as influences, they're definitely, digging and going forward. One of my attractions in our early meeting was, as an organization builder, and I've done that kind of all my life, is Gender Amplified. One, because it's so needed and so critical, and I thought it was so refreshing to hear about it. Talk about your baby, where it is, the Control Room series, all that good stuff. Right.
So my baby turned 14 this year.
Wow.
13.
Wow.
I got a teenager on my hands. And the great thing about Gender Amplified is it started as my senior thesis project at Barnard College. So I wanted to interrogate this idea of women in the studio, specifically women producers who are working on hip hop. I was reading a book called Black Noise by an incredible scholar named Trisha Rose, and I believe it's the 3rd chapter. She begins to talk about women in the studio and how there are issues that affect women's mobility and accessibility to studio equipment, but also to studio culture in general. And she started to say that, if we want to see more women really involved as practitioners on the technical end, then we have to have more women-led institutions. It is outlined in her book. And in my opinion, it was the quintessential work. This is a woman who wrote a book in 1990, early 1990s, I think 94, about hip hop. And it was really groundbreaking at that time. And we take hip hop scholarship for granted now. But she was a woman who was interviewing the likes of Hank Shockley and so many other incredible producers. And she was in the club, and she had made these inroads, and she started to notice these issues. And this served as my blueprint for what I felt I needed to do, although I didn't know it at the time. So I was just writing my thesis because I was a woman in production, and I was concerned about my lack of female peers. I had male peers and they were great, but I went to an incredible women's college, and it did make sense to me from just a numbers perspective. I was like, there's so many incredible women at the school. They're all extremely smart. You mean to tell me none of them can make beats? It just didn't make sense. Right. And also, according to the World Bank, women make up like 4 billion people in the world. You mean none of them can make beats? So it didn't make sense. And so me being inquisitive, I decided to dedicate my thesis work to that. And as I began to question and look for these women to interview, to do an ethnography, my thesis advisor gave me this incredible opportunity to pair my work with a conference, to pair my senior thesis with a conference. So all of a sudden I was a conference organizer. And I brought to campus that spring, a couple weeks before I turned in my thesis, I brought to campus Trisha Rose, the writer of the book that I've been studying, and I brought to campus Spinderella from Salt and Pepper and DJ Rekka and all these incredible women, and some women who were also from this organization called Femix.com, and they produced this great documentary on women in production called Lady Beatmakers Volume 1. This was 2007.
Wow.
Mind you, Trisha Rose wrote this book in like 1994. Mm-hmm. So this conversation of women in studio culture is not new. There's nothing new about it, you know? And so over the years since my undergraduate work, I've been moving in the business, and I've been seeing all these things firsthand that I was theorizing about as a student. Mm-hmm. And as I've grown, I'm realizing, okay, now this was 2007. We still have a long way to go. So me being me, I built Gender Amplified little by little, just year by year, just as a means of taking up the call. You know, Trisha Rose issued the call out, and I felt moved and compelled to do the work to try to figure out, okay, how do we alleviate some of these issues? Now, apart from the issues and the problems, here lately, I think I've realized that Gender Amplified, with respect to its mission statement, is about making sure that young women collide with music production and technology because it's transformative. Mm-hmm. Doesn't matter what you end up going off to do.
Right.
Just learning about the art is transformative, and it's life-saving. I see what it's done to my life. I see how it's transformed everybody's life on this call. Mm-hmm. So it doesn't matter where you end up. It's great if you can end up at the top of the charts, but you can still gain so much from just being exposed to the craft, right? Everybody's not going to be a top pianist that takes piano lessons.
That's right.
But nobody would devalue the importance of taking piano lessons. So Gender Amplified these days is about creating spaces for women to feel comfortable learning about music technology and feeling empowered through learning about music technology. And we reach our mission statement through our live events, as well as through our social media platforms that we maintain to ensure that we're shouting out all of those women that need recognition, who are in the business and doing incredible things.
Really quickly, how many members, and you know we're there to support you. How many members do you have now?
Well, so Gender Amplified is not member-based. Mm-hmm. We don't have a member base as much as we're looking to galvanize and organize people on our social media platforms. So right now, we're at about 3,000 Instagram followers.
Okay.
And about couple thousand Twitter followers. So we're still young with respect to how we're building our audience and building our community. Mm-hmm. But we're also at the point where I recognize that legitimizing what we're doing from an institutional perspective and making sure all of our back end is together, making sure our taxes and our business entity is together. I've spent quite a few years making sure that we're legitimized with respect to the business. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So we're looking to make a huge marketing push in the next several months. And we've been doing some really great fundraising so that we can begin to really bring our programs in a major way to our potential audience base. Yeah.
Good on you, Ebonie. Great.
Thank you.
I'm sitting here thinking, when I was a kid, and also for a long time after that, one of the things I enjoyed most about school was that they taught music in school.
Right.
And so universal, and we don't hear anything about that now. And I'd love to see maybe you take on something like that, because you could probably change it knowing how you are. But we played, we didn't have to buy an instrument. The instruments were provided, and we played a little bit of several different types of music. But the teachers were always smart enough to know that if they taught us the hits of the day, we would definitely come back, you know. And it was actually, there was two parts of the day that I really loved. One was recess, and one was the music. Mm-hmm. And so a modern day version of that could be, you might have like 20 DAWs. You might have a bunch of laptops. It could be a computer thing rather than a live instrument thing. And then maybe you could do some live instruments and introduce those along the way too. Mm-hmm. But that to me, I think would help. And this was in the second and third grade. So if you're being inculcated with music at a young age, you're more likely to want to make it at some point.
Absolutely.
Men and women. So I think it's something that's overlooked. I'd love to hear your opinion on that because you're the expert on that. I'm not.
Right.
I just stay in the studio. That's all I do. But what's your thoughts on that, Ebonie?
I like to think that your point about computers and laptops is so very important because that is the modern day upright piano. And it is a space where young people have found they don't need traditional institutions to learn about music. So they don't have to go to school. The school might not have music programs. But the laptop, the computer, and even by extension, the phone is an incredible educational opportunity when it comes to music education. So for the last several years, actually last 5 years or so, I've been teaching a course when I have the opportunity, which is not very often, but I've been teaching a course called Music Production for Smartphones, which is geared at introducing music production to young people using phones and tablets. So I think the computer and computerized electronics that are accessible are the modern way of introducing young people to music and music production and engineering in more specifically. So that's number one. Also, Berklee College of Music just recognized the computer as a legitimate instrument, an actual instrument. So we're changing with respect to how we think about music and culture, how we think about instruments and culture. And I think it's really going to shape the music that's being made, but it's also going to make music education way more accessible than it has been in the last, I would say, 30 years.
Without question, we were lucky enough, and you would be also incredible to do this when we were approached by Google 3 or 4 years ago. You did the last award show, so it was the award show before that. And by the way, Ebonie is a Pensado Award person who joined us and represented well and was certainly deserving. But when Google approached us, Dave and I were flabbergasted, frankly. And they had come to the award show. But the context that they gave us was they saw music people as tech people. Mm-hmm. And that a lot of people utilized our show to, one, get in touch and be able to sort of navigate it as tech people in ways they found interesting and inspiring. And lights went on with us that the messaging is getting through in ways that, because contextually it's important to give people layers that they understand. Right. Like if you're just talking to somebody in a way they don't understand, you're not doing yourself any good or them.
Right.
And so what we try to do with the show is be broad enough that no matter where you are in the spectrum, that you can get a piece of it for yourself and then maybe learn something that you didn't know and hopefully use those tools to make it better. And, since then, as we've talked about on the phone, we've had a number of streaming platforms and technology-based, YouTube has come on, Netflix has come on, we've gone to Google, they've come on, And it makes us really proud that as we stick to core principles about audio and pull the cover back on such bad talent like yourself and others, that the broader world goes, yeah, and I need to get involved, and what they're doing is valuable, and how can I get myself involved in that and learn and teach people? And that's what we think the power of audio folks sometimes miss.
Right.
That this impact, like we say all the time, there's no place in the world that's silent. Mm-hmm. That means that your horizons are unlimited. So don't look at it through a narrow thing. Look at it through a broad lens. And we're in good hands if you represent what's the best of it. But now here's the test. The test is batter's box. All these platitudes and stuff that we've been talking about and all that kind of stuff. When Dave throws up these things, you just knock his block off with your answers, and you will absolutely win. And you'll go down this history as not only very cerebral and learned, but a heck of an athlete as well.
Yes. I am a pretty good athlete, actually.
Are you? What do you play?
I played basketball for a very long time. That's actually what afforded me a much better education.
I was gonna say to you, and this is just because I was raised by women. Shout out to your mom and your grandmother, because If you go to Barnard, NYU, Berkeley, Cameroon, and that stuff, somebody is doing their thing. So whether it's athletic skills or the way you were raised, I know Mama Wit is in there big time. And you look like you played forward.
I was a 2 guard. Actually.
You were 2, so you can shoot.
I'm a shooting guard.
Okay, cool. I love hoops. We can do that off camera. I love hoops. I'm a hoop fanatic. Everybody who knows me will tell you. So, Dave, let's tee up batter's box, and you got a 2 guard. So this is this is Kobe, Jordan. There's a number of folks here that she emulates. Let's go.
First, I want to get the blessings of the show staff. This is one of the most formidable opponents I've ever had. So should I go light on her? Or should I just try to cream her? What should I do?
No. Go. Go hard. Go hard in the paint.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anything can go. Okay.
One word if you can. 1 or 2 words if you can.
Yeah, if you say Dave, go to hell. That's an answer that counts.
Oh, yeah. Dave, you ignorant slut. That's my preference.
Oh, no.
Huh?
I said, oh, no.
Right.
Okay, here we go. Limiter.
33609.
Nice.
Bass.
What was it?
Bass.
Moog Voyager.
Lead vocals.
Vocal chain 1073 to CL1B. That's me all day.
Great. Loops.
Arcade all day.
Stereo bus.
I'm blanking.
I have you on low end focus.
Isotope.
That's right. Reverb.
EMT.
Template. Recording template.
Necessary. Must have.
808.
808s. Where do I get mine? Splice.com.
There you go. Good.
Guitars. I know you play guitar, so guitars.
Martin, definitely. 00 series Martin.
Describe to me, or let me know, what is the cheapest piece of equipment that you've used on a high profile record?
Oh. The cheapest piece of equipment I've used on a high profile record. Really, I don't know that I have used anything cheap on a high profile record. Trying to think. I don't have any Behringer. I don't know. I'm sorry. Can I say that? That's not nice to say.
You can say that.
I don't own any Behringer M Audio Axiom, maybe. MIDI controller. Maybe that's the cheapest thing I've used on a high profile record.
There you go.
Cool. It was close, especially with that last question, but I think you got me. So.
Well, see, as a 2 guard, she would go from short corner threes to shooting some at the elbow, and she'd go back and forth, and it's hard to defend that sometimes. So you don't face that many cerebral athletes who also have a jumper, but you did good, Dave. You did good. You held it. We're proud of you.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you. That's harder than it seems.
It is.
You have to be really thinking quick.
We like to throw you off guard, lull you into sleep, before we throw up, the hard defense. That's why we do it toward the end of the interview.
I hate to admit this, guys, but during quarantine, I've become a fanatic for a Family Feud. And so,
oh my God!
I'm starting to look at this. I love Family Feud.
I cannot believe you said that, because
I watch 5 or 6 a day.
I do too. I literally can do Steve Hart. Anyways, we're digressing. Let's finish with the interview. But yeah, us too. Quarantine behavior is very, very odd. Ebonie,
it's crazy.
We are blessed in that during the now almost 500 episodes of this show, over the course of now beyond a decade, we have, and as what you were so kind to say about us in the beginning, we've been blessed by pretty much the very best. And the perspective it gives us is what is been in the past, because those folks come on, what's going on currently, and fortunately, somehow Dave and I seem to appeal to young folks, and we get a chance to see what's in the future. And I think, if I'm being candid, there are times where we go, things are great, and then there's times we go, ooh, not sure where it's going. It's kind of weird. I think I'm probably, speaking for myself personally, I'm probably so cool about the future that I could have 20 bad interviews, and knowing that you're around and you represent the future, that this business is in phenomenal shape. And I just must say this, I'm going to say this as a Black human being. It is, at this particular time, it is wonderful for me to find out that to let the rest of the world know that the Ebonie Smiths of the world are not unusual.
Right.
There's a lot of us out there like that. That's how I grew up. And this is a normal context for folks who want to achieve and do well and are motivated and come from great families and share the knowledge and contribute back. And so I love who you are and what you represent. And I think it is absolutely amazing. And the problem is, and then Dave, you can wrap us up, is you just not going to be able to get rid of me. I'm helping you even if you don't ask. So
true.
So you got a fan, and this platform is yours to use, and kudos to you. Absolutely.
Thank you. I really, seriously, thank you so much. It means so very much. And just to add to that, I don't know that I could foresee that a time like this would come in culture that is causing everything that I am and everything that I've learned to converge.
Mm-hmm.
So before I get off, I just want to quickly plug an initiative that I co-founded at Atlantic Records, which is called Off Color.
Mm-hmm.
And we are an educational series that started with 8 other co-workers plus myself. So that's 9 of us. And we're looking very critically at racial justice issues as they pertain to the music business, as they pertain to Atlantic Records. We're inward focused at the time, meaning that we are basically creating programming that is bringing educational resources around race and racism and racial justice to our company specifically.
Mm-hmm.
But I never thought that I would see gender relations, gender politics, racial justice, inquiry, music, and technology converge in the way that it has. And so I definitely do feel equipped, but also prepared and motivated to contribute. So I say that all to say that platforms like yours really matter to me, and the support that you've shown me really matters, because no one can do this alone. And there's a lot of work to do with respect to our industry, but also with respect to our culture and our country.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm excited about the road ahead, but also understand that there will be a lot of heavy lifting. So the fact that I can call on the two of you means the world to me. So thank you so much.
We're with you.
A vote of confidence, but also for your support.
We're with you 100%. Dave, take us home.
Guys, I love the study of creativity. I love being around creative people, and I love learning about creativity. And it's just a very fleeting, ephemeral thing. Back before I was an engineer, I ran across Paul McCartney, and I asked him a question. I said, how do you come up with melodies? How do you come up with solos? How do you come up with the things you come up with? And he said to me, well, I always try to work from my heart. I always try to just let my creativity flow. And if I get stumped, I go to licks I've memorized off of records, and I rip off the records that I know. If that stumps me, then I go to my education. And I thought that was brilliant. And I carried that into my engineering world. And I think it's a good way to think about creativity. Don't try to force it. Know that you've got backups with your records that you know real well, and then with your education. But I thought I'd share that with you because we had a good time talking about creativity, and we'll see you next week.